and candles you can light in remembrance of something spoken or unspoken. If you have something to express there, please feel free to go back to the memory book and candles early in the service. Today, we welcome back to our pulpit one of our own UUCB members, the Reverend Dr. Jay Atkinson. Jay, with his wife Ariel Summerlin, moved to the East Bay and joined our congregation in 2011 after he retired from 32 years of full-time Unitarian Universalist parish ministry, most recently in service in Studio City, Los Angeles, and before that, 13 years in Davis, California. During those ministries, he also served at various times as an adjunct faculty member of our UU seminaries in Chicago, the Meadville Lombard Theological School, and in Berkeley at the Starr King School for the Ministry. Before turning to professional ministry, he did research in nuclear physics for 11 years. Currently, he is a research scholar at Starr King with a focus on UU history and sometimes, as he likes to say, a bit of theology. Welcome back. Now please rise in body or spirit to join in singing our opening song, Morning Has Come, number 1000 in the Teal hymnal. The words will be on the screen.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
As we gather this morning, we remind ourselves that our church occupies land in Huchiun, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. May we have the humility and courage to do our part to restore what has been broken, and the wisdom to live in a new solidarity with indigenous communities and the earth.
This chalice as a symbol of all that we value most deeply. May its dancing flame remind us of the energy and resilience of the human spirit in times of both joy and grief. May its light be a beacon of truth for all who seek to discover and understand life's deepest meanings and possibilities. May its warmth deepen our bonds with one another in this religious community as we join to work for the common good with integrity, joy, and service. Come, let us worship.
Would you join me now in saying our covenant? Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Whoops. I think I just lost my mic. No. All right, we'll make do with this. How am I going to do this? All right. I invite the children to come up here and join me on the steps if you would like. Would you like to come up here? I have some ideas and thoughts to share with you. Welcome. How is everybody this morning? I'm going to start out by showing you something. This is a pair of my old pants. I don't wear them anymore. They're tattered at the bottom. They have holes in them. And because of my waist size, I can't even button them anymore. So what do we do when we outgrow old clothes? What do we do with them? What? Donate them? That's a good idea. What else? What else can we do with them? Make them into something else. Wow, very good. Well, what I want to talk about this morning is exactly what you said. We can make old clothes sometimes into something else. And this rug, do you know what this kind of rug is called? A rag rug? You ever hear of that?
Rag rug.
A rag rug. And it's made from old threads and pieces of fabric that are all woven together into something that's new and beautiful. Isn't that wonderful? That's a really important thing that we can do with old clothes that we don't have any more use for anymore. And this stole that I'm wearing, look at that. It's a patchwork of pieces of fabric that came from somewhere else. I don't know where all the pieces came from. But so often in our lives, when we outgrow clothes or have something else that we don't use anymore, we can imagine something beautiful to do with it. We can imagine beautiful colors like the rainbow fabric here in our church, all kinds of things. So that's my not really a story, that's my message for you this morning. And now I want to end by teaching you a new song that I don't think we've ever sung before. But Katya, would you play it through once? and so we can hear the tune, and the words will be on the screen. And after you learn it, then we'll ask the congregation to sing it to you as you leave, but not yet. And peace and gladness, go in joy and peace today. Go with love from all who guide you on your... You want to try that? Go in joy and peace and gladness. Go in joy and peace today. Go with love from all who guide you on your way. And now it's time for you to go out, and we'll continue singing. Go to your classes. Go in joy and peace and gladness. Go in joy and peace today. Go with love from all who guide you on your way. Go in joy and peace and gladness. Go in joy and peace today. Go with love from all who guide you on your way.
This June, I will complete my 83rd year on planet Earth. Perhaps this is a time to reflect on my theological views. I have not been consistent. When asked, Don, what do you really believe? Typically I say, don't ask me if I believe in God. That is too abstract. Ask me what I do. Do I pray? Genuinely enter into prayer? During some periods, I have, and others, it's just not been open to me. What made the difference? I don't know. I gave up my belief in Santa Claus when I was about 5 years old. However, I distinctly remember when I was 7 or 8, asking my father explicitly, "Do you believe in God?" I had acquired some notion of God and somehow understood that there can be a question about God's existence. We were sitting on the old sofa. After a few moments of reflection, he answered, "Yes, I do." I did not ask him to elaborate. That settled it. If my dad does, so will I. My picture of God, however, seems somewhat modeled on the Santa Claus I had disavowed. An old gray-haired and bearded man, although not as plump, rosy, or jovial. In my mind, God sat on a stool in front of a telephone switchboard. I had this image because my grandfather's second wife was a telephone operator, as shown in the movies, connecting calls by plugging in various cords into the switchboard. This picture's good except for the hair part and the beard. This was my pictorial answer to the question that bothered me. How could God hear every prayer and connect it with a particular person reaching out? And this was not unrelated to my earlier concern about Santa Claus. How could Santa have the inside scoop on every child's record of being naughty or nice? But most importantly, this picture of God gave me confidence that God heard my prayers, my little monologues, asking for the happiness and safety of all my beloved ones. I named each one by one, before going to bed, and this allowed me to rest in sleep. You can imagine what came next. This childhood notion of God did not survive my journey through puberty and entering the age of reason. All the inconsistencies and implausibility of religious dogma and the historical moral outrages of organized religion came crashing in. The problem of evil, the suffering of innocence, and the materialistic mindset of the modern age. No easy notion of God survived. But somehow, the experience of prayer did survive. Not always, and not without long, dry spells. What was left then when God, as depicted in conventional and I would say childish notions, is dead? We use the word spirit of life. The UU minister of my youth, Dr. Raymond Cope, used to open his prayers with, "Thou eternal Spirit." But these phrases are too abstract for me. They have a hollow sound. What's left when I still need to utter something that gives me a way to acknowledge or name the haunting presence I feel after I have banished God from my worldview? We sometimes resort to words like the abiding mystery of existence. This does approach bedrock for me, but only approach. I still have to ask, what is this mystery? Now, it has to be distinguished from the unknown. There are countless unknowns and unknowables, but these are not mysteries. We just don't have explanations for or suspect we won't ever find them. The mysteries that haunt me are of a different order. They call my attention not just to the world we live in, but to our essential nature. That is, to our essential nature of living as living beings who exist in interconnection, in mutual presence with one another. So my theological journey has led me here, to the experience of presence, and what strikes me as the mystery of mutual presence. You and I, two inner worlds, inner spheres of light, of consciousness, meeting and sharing reciprocal recognition and caring. That is the mystery, as unnoticeable to us as water is to the fish who swim in it. This kind of connection we experience with one another, we can also experience with the whole, with all that is real in all directions of space and time. This reminds me of the I-thou relationship that Martin Buber wrote about, and how we can relate to each other as thou, and as well relate to the whole of reality, inner and outer, as thou. In such moments, I have found myself experiencing the presence of the all, addressing the all as thou, as a subject, not an object. Here I am entering into prayer. Did that unveil the mystery? No, not really. But it does reveal what prayer is for me. Not pleading or imploring for what might be missing, but rather a commingling of feelings of longing, grief, sorrow, joy, bafflement, gratitude, and awe, and sometimes great comfort and peace. Any or all of the notes on the human emotion scale in various compositions. All except fear, which seems absent or at least muted. Ah, you might say, you believe in a higher power. No, not at all. A higher power conveys to me the image of a puppet master, something beyond pulling the strings, making things happen. My experience of entering prayer, when I'm graced with it, opens me into mutual presence with the whole of reality, and to not feeling separate or alien, but rather, in a deep sense, that I belong here. On this Sunday before Memorial Day, we offer you these words from American poet and World War I veteran Archibald MacLeish.
The young dead soldiers do not speak.
Nevertheless, they are heard in the still houses. Who has not heard them?
They have a silence that speaks for them at night and when the clock counts.
They say, "We were young. We have died. Remember us."
They say, "We have done what we could, but until it is finished, it is not done."
They say, "We have given our lives, but until it is finished, no one can know what our lives gave."
They say, "Our deaths are not ours. They are yours. They will mean what you make them mean."
They say, "Whether our lives and our deaths were for peace and a new hope, or for nothing, we cannot say. It is you who must say this."
They say, "We leave you our deaths. Give them their meaning."
We were young, they say. We have died. Remember us.
As we settle now into a time of quiet, of meditation, of centering, I invite you to take a deep breath with me, and then a deeper breath. Close your eyes if you wish, or focus on our altar table or on the flame of our chalice as we turn inward for a few moments. Those words of Archibald MacLeish that Don and I have just read remind us of so many whose deaths and whose lives have been taken by wars that they did not start, wars that were perhaps defensible or understandable, others misguided and immoral. So many deaths lost to the violence of human fear and anger and belligerence. We feel the earth holding us as we bear witness to stories too hard to speak, memories held in bodies, in empty arms, as ancestors whisper, "No more, never again." How many deaths will it take till we know that too many people have died? In this place, in this sanctuary, let us honor all of the wounds, the scars that have come from useless violence. Honor the spirits broken even in the midst of seeking wholeness, seeking meaning. Lives that went to war to defend precious values or longed for a better way, answering a call, whether noble or misguided, to serve something greater. Let this be a house of reunion, calling our beloveds home. In a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, youthful trees cut down before their times, let new leaves of protest grow upon those barren stumps. Let new branches bear fruit of deeper wisdom for another day. With our bare hands, with our full hearts, with minds filled with the clarity of compassionate vision, let us create together a lasting peace. And now, within the sanctuary of these sacred walls, let us sit in silence with one another as we dream a world transformed by love. In this sanctuary, in this community, we acknowledge the joys and the pains that weave together in our lives. Someone writes love and support to Sylvia Parasotto, who has a discouraging brain scan. Please sign the super card that you will find on the table out in the atrium. Julia and Smiley say that they ran a 5K race yesterday. Anne Greenwood and Bob Moore say thanks to all who helped with the art sale, both with talent and treasure and fine donations. Karen Elliott expresses gratitude that the surgeries of two dear friends went well. Wynne writes, "May we find healing and wholeness in and for ourselves and our world." Beth Gerda says, "Greenfield in residence, tornado weather," reference to the tornado in Iowa early this week. Karen Welch offers a prayer for all those living with chronic conditions that aren't easily treated medically. May we all learn more about how to heal ourselves and one another through body, mind, and spirit. Barbara and William send prayers for comfort and peace as her dear friends. And Lindsay says, I'm sorry, I can't make this out, or something about day. For all of these heartfelt thoughts and all of those left unspoken, symbolized by candles, silent candles, may we hold one another in our hearts. Amen. And I invite you now to remain seated as we sing our meditative hymn, number 8 in the gray hymnal. The words will be on the screen. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit.
Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, where are you? In the sky song, in the forest sounds your cry. What to give you, what to call you, what am I? Many drops are in the ocean, deep and wide. Sunlight bounces off the ripples to the sky. What to give you, what to call you, who am I am empty, time flies from me. What is time? Dreams eternal, fears infernal haunt my heart. What to give you, what to call you, oh my God. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit,
One of the favorite things that I love to do since moving to California nearly 40 years ago now is to take walks in the redwoods. Redwood groves comfort me, calm me. And they remind me that I've always been fascinated by big things. When I was about 8 or 9 years old in Indiana, where there are no redwoods, the vastness of the night sky grabbed my imagination. I began dreaming of becoming an astronomer. But as the saying goes, a funny thing happened on my way to the telescope. I realized that physics was more deeply what astronomy was all about. And so my vision expanded. And for almost 20 years, I devoted myself to physics and mathematics, which have a wonderful beauty for me, even though some people think mathematics doesn't have much beauty at all. I devoted myself to being a scientist with the conviction that the scientific method provided the only pathway to sure knowledge. But another funny thing happened on my way to becoming master of the universe. In my early 30s, I began to be deeply involved in the life of a UU church that I had recently joined. And those big questions about the nature of physical reality gradually began to be replaced by different kinds of big questions. Questions like, what is the quality of the world, the universe that we live in? Why do things happen as they do? Who or what is in charge? Is the universe friendly? Is it cruel? Is it all an accident? Do things happen randomly or as the result of some universal laws that determine everything and leave no room for human freedom? Or is it ruled by some inscrutable divine plan that we can never understand? At some era in human history, our ancestors, we know, began to ask questions like this, and you know something about the answers that early people gave, creating pantheons of gods and goddesses that are basically projections of human desires and foibles and society up onto a kind of big TV screen in the sky. Then, starting in Israel almost 2,800 years ago, the idea of a single God arose. A creator God, a God who demands not burnt offerings or empty rituals, but who demands justice. Justice as the greatest human responsibility. And you also all know, I think, how this idea of God was carried forward from Judaism first into Christianity and then into Islam. And at their best, all three of these monotheistic religions have tried, and I emphasize tried, to maintain the idea of a world of beauty and goodness, with us as human beings of worth and dignity and intelligence and creativity, all created in the image of God, of a loving God. But ideas change. We change. Our knowledge of the earth changes. And the old theologies stop making sense. Magical thinking doesn't work for most of us. Scientific models explain and allow us to manipulate more and more of the physical world around us. The world of atoms and electricity, cell biology and evolution of plants and animals, electronic technology, human physiology, medical and surgical interventions and repairs. And beyond the questions of that kind that science can answer lie other kinds of questions, questions of meaning, of good and evil, right and wrong, values of beauty and truth, human freedom, and moral responsibility. Theology purports to deal with such questions. And we're all theologians at some level, in one way or another. Each of us has some kind of worldview that we have evolved, maybe, I hope, still in process. But a worldview, some set of beliefs or pictures or words or gut feelings that give us an understanding of the human meaning of this world, what our place in it is, what our responsibilities are to the world and to each other, and what our ultimate fate is, either individually or collectively. Now, you may not spend a lot of your waking hours thinking about questions like these, as much as I do. It's an occupational hazard, I suppose. But you probably did ask them at some point or at multiple points in your life. If your religious life journey is anything like mine, then it may have been wrestling with questions like those that brought you to this or to some other UU congregation for the first time. Images or beliefs that we had as children or younger adults often become or begin to seem naive as we mature, as Don shared with us in his own journey. And like garments that we've outgrown, we need to shuck off those youthful and simple-minded theologies and clothe ourselves with more sophisticated ways of understanding the world. I like the metaphor or the image of theology as a kind of garment that we weave for ourselves. And this image, this metaphor, came to me a few months ago in an essay I discovered, actually one written quite a number of years ago, by process theologian Marjorie Suhaki. Here's what she wrote back in the 1980s in her essay, Weaving the World. Before I began the study of theology, she says, I had the entire world figured out. I knew the divine plan and the divine mind and the whole scheme of things. My theology was not like a garment, but like a crystal, which encased me, rigid, unyielding, ungiving. This was all a long time ago, certainly before I became a feminist or ever heard of process theology. A feminist process theology, she continues, calls for a new strand to be woven into our theologies, the strand of humility. It calls for theology to view itself as the garment woven out of our experience, to play with theological ideas, to experiment, to listen to differences with interest rather than a sense of threat. That's the end of her words. Experiment and play. The play does not stop. As our bodies change with a gain or loss of weight as we age, we either need to get new clothes or make adjustments in the old ones, letting out or taking in a seam here or there, patching up or reweaving where the fabric has worn thin. Likewise, as we grow into maturity, middle age, and older age, our perspectives change. Like the image on our screen, previous theologies may need patching up or may just be totally beyond repair. And we need an entirely new way of thinking about the world. We do this as individuals with differing experiences, histories, perspectives, and our entire UU tradition has made theological shifts over the years. Take the idea, the old Christian idea of original sin. Some of you know that one of my focuses of interest in UU history goes back to the 16th century and the early group of religious rebels who called themselves the Polish Brethren, the progenitors of our Unitarian tradition. Their leader, Fausto Sozzini, an Italian theologian, rejected the idea of a God who knew the future. Makes no sense, he said. If we are truly free human beings, able to make our own decisions, then there is no future yet determined for anybody, including God, to know. This rejection of divine omnipotence, of divine omniscience, was one of the early examples of the way that our liberal religious tradition began reweaving old theologies. A similar thing happened in New England 2 centuries later, when more liberal-minded people in congregational churches began to think of human nature as something good and improvable, rather than sinful and depraved. Calling themselves Universalists, they rejected the whole idea of hell that their outmoded Puritan theology was threatening them with. In both of those eras, in the 1560s and the 1760s, the old theological garments had ceased to fit. They became constricting, intellectually unacceptable or nonsensical, and needed some alterations. The liberal wing of the Boston clergy made room for they loosened their old theological garments, expanded the seams, we might say, and made room for a more positive view of human nature as worthy of dignity and honor, even salvation. A few decades later, they would be kicked out by the Orthodox Christians, and they openly began to take on the Unitarian name. But the task still wasn't finished. Those early Unitarians, and I'm thinking in the 1810s, 1820s, still held on to the concept of God that was both supernatural and all-powerful. And with that, we come to the perennial challenge of evil. Academic theologians call this the problem of theodicy, the attempt to explain how a God who we traditionally claim is all-loving and all-powerful can allow evil and suffering to exist. Many people in their daily lives still struggle with this question. And old ways of theologizing have deep roots and are hard to shake off. In many segments of our society, when some illness or natural disaster occurs, people will come up with what I would call one-sentence theologies. Things I'm sure you've all heard, like, everything happens for a reason. It's all part of God's plan. It's punishment for this or that human sin or evil doing or shortcoming. Many people are so trapped in traditional ideas of God that they invent simplistic workarounds like these to reassure themselves. But to my mind, the real problem is that these old ideas about God are just badly worn out. They don't fit anymore with what we know about the world. And such ideas, like that tattered jacket, greatly need repair, or reweaving, or maybe just total replacement. The old jacket no longer keeps us warm. The old theology just stops making sense. In our UU churches, I think people have typically reacted to this challenge in three ways. The first way is just to chuck out the word God and everything associated with it as being empty of meaning, or at least any helpful meaning. The universe is just impersonal, uncaring, devoid of moving in the direction of any goodness or beauty or truth. The second way is that we like the comforting idea of some spiritual force, some higher power, an ultimate idea of love, perhaps, that moves us in better directions, but don't want to call it God. We use substitute phrases like spirit of life in one of our favorite hymns, for example. And the third way is to continue to speak the word God, but mean something radically different from the classical and orthodox understandings that have told us who or what God is. All three of these options, and maybe more, have good historical precedents, and I suspect that some of you resonate with one or the other of these three approaches. So let me be clear about my own place along this spectrum. I'm not neutral. I like keeping the word God in my own theological vocabulary, but as I say, with a radically revised understanding, a different concept of God than the one or maybe the various ones that we've traditionally been offered. For me and for many people, I think, the fundamental question is, where do our deep feelings of right and wrong, fairness and injustice come from? Are they just quirky aspects of human evolution? Do we just happen to have something inside us that we call a conscience? Or are they rooted in some cosmic source or standard of value? Well, we could write a whole book about these questions, and lots of people have. But I'm going to focus this morning on one of the most challenging aspects, the toughest nut to crack, so to speak, the meaning of divine power. Traditional hymns that I grew up with are filled with phrases like Almighty God. But you might be surprised to know that such a phrase occurs nowhere in the Bible. It's entirely a notion from Greek philosophy, but it has infected, and I do mean infected, our Western ways of imagining or thinking about God for 2 millennia. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, it's really bad and dysfunctional theology. Bad in 2 different ways. It's logically incoherent, and in a more practical sense, it damages the lives of people who believe it because it leads to unrealistic pain and expectations. So what's the corrective? How do we repair such ideas? Well, as some of you know, the answers that I personally have found lie in process theology, as represented by people like Marjorie Suhaki, whose words I quoted from and who introduced me to the garment metaphor. She, along with many others, going back to Alfred North Whitehead a century ago, back in the 1920s, worked out a different way of thinking about God. And it's exemplified by one of my favorite examples, a book by Charles Hartshorne titled Omnipotence and Other Theological Mistakes. I could probably do a whole sermon, or maybe several sermons on that book, but in brief, I'll say that what Whitehead and almost other process theologians agree on is that the power of divinity, or of holiness in our lives, is a persuasive power, an interior power, not an external coercive power. God does not coerce. God is not a tyrant or a punisher. God lacks any ability to intervene in the laws of nature. Rather, we need to think of God, says Hartshorne and others, as a reality in the world that lures us, and everything else in the universe lures us forward by a vision of beauty and goodness. We, in our freedom, can be persuaded to follow that lure, or to turn away, to follow more selfish and narrow ambitions. And in extreme examples, that is what accounts for evil in the world. Turning away from a vision of a common good, of a unified fabric. This kind of thinking has been influential among a really surprising fraction of UU ministers. In a recent survey, fully 1/3 of all UU ministers reported prostheology as their main way of personally understanding the cosmos and the way that we live within it. And a few of them have written books about it. One of the best ones, I think, is by my colleague Galen Gingerich, minister for only 30 years at the All Souls Unitarian Church on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Revising God is the title, and with the subtitle, How Religion Must Evolve in a Scientific Age. Revision. And indeed, in these days, I think revision is all around us. 4 years ago, for example, the UUA Commission on Institutional Change, in its report called Widening the Circle of Concern, called for renewed attention to theology in our churches, for experimenting with theology, and for reinterpretation of our theological legacies. We have a group of people in this congregation who have worked very hard on the recommendations of that commission and its report. Just last month in Denver, at a gathering of Unitarian Universalists from around the western United States, our UUA president, the Reverend Sophia Betancourt, was in dialogue with her counterpart in the United Church of Christ, the Reverend Karen Georgia Thompson. Both of these liberal, theologically inclined ministers spoke together about what was going on in their respective churches. Sophia reiterated her concern about the lack of serious theological conversation within our UU congregations. And the Reverend Ms. Thompson, speaking about people in her own UCC churches, lamented the negative effects of what she called toxic God talk. Ideas about God that don't help anyone, but that prevail in a lot of so-called progressive churches. So we Unitarian Universalists are far from being the only ones these days who are concerned with weeding out or repairing bad theologies and trying on some new theological garments to replace the worn out ones. I think weaving and reweaving the garments of our theologies, both individually and collectively, is a lifelong task. It certainly has been and continues to be that for me, and as we heard from Don in his reflections, also a lifelong task that never stops. And our UU tradition has repeatedly, at times of growing pains, needed to expand its collective theological horizons, to weave new ideas into the fabric of the old, to lift up our collective vision to a more liberating future than we previously knew or could see. In doing that work of weaving, each of us have our own unique threads that are of a different nature, a different color, a different strength or texture, unique threads to contribute to the weaving of garments of beauty. Rainbow fabrics like these that we see here are up above us in the sanctuary that contain and harmonize all of the diverse and multicolored goodness of our lives. We weave visions of loveliness for all to see, and in our weaving, we build beloved communities, communities whose moral beauty may shine forth as models for building the peaceful human family that we dream of in these troubled times. May it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.
We invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. It is time for the offering. Instead of passing the plate, you can give electronically by scanning the QR code in the back of your badge, or you can put a cash or check donation into the envelope that you'll find in the back of the pew in front of you. Write your name on it and mark offering plate or pledge, and then put it into the donation box beside the fountain in the atrium as you leave the service. Each week, half of the offering plate is shared with a nonprofit Good Neighbor organization recommended by our Social Justice Council. Thank you so much for practicing generosity with UUCB and with our good neighbors. The good neighbor for this month is Yes, Nature to Neighborhoods. In partnership with nature, Yes nurtures leaders who champion the well-being of our community. Their vision is for Richmond youth, adults, and families to lead healthy, connected lives, motivate change in their neighborhoods, and inspire a safe and thriving community. Thank you. Please join me now in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create a loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. It's been good being together today, and I want to give a special thanks to Reverend Jay. You are a treasure for us. And I want to remind you to check our website, uuc.org, to explore all the things that are available in our congregation. On the homepage in news, you'll see a link to our weekly newsletter, The Week Ahead, which includes a list of activities, announcements, and contact information. I have 4 announcements today. On June 2nd, come to Roads and Rolls of Comedy, 6 comedy play performances. It's a fundraiser for music and arts. Second, also on June 2nd, will be our last assembly of blessing bags for this church year. It will take place after the service in the social hall. And on Saturday, June 8th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., we will have the worship retreat, the first of, I hope, many, facilitated by Reverend Marcus. The Art of Worship, a day-long retreat to help build a community of ritual artists at UUCB. And this is an invitation to all congregation members who are so inspired. RSVP on our website. And finally, the art show and sale benefit for our Freestone retreat is still open. In the atrium, you can check it out after the service. Now please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing song, Dear Weaver of Our Lives Design, number 22 in the gray hymnal. The words will be on the screen.
Dear weaver of our lives' design, whose patterns on my babe, with skillful fingers gently guide the sturdy earth should well survive. Go of our days, take up the fabric of our lives with hands that gently hold, and in the ragged hilted care would sunder, and that pain would tear and mend our raveling souls. Let eyes that in the plainest cloth a hidden beauty see, discern as art edges hues, show us the patterns we may use to set our spirits free.
And now, as we prepare to depart from this hour of worship, I invite you to reach out a hand, touch an elbow, a shoulder, whatever is comfortable to make you feel connected. We are weavers. We weave our own lives as works of art. Together we weave communities that shall be beautiful. In our weaving, we do sacred work. May we continue in this congregation to do so, and to, with all people with whom we come in contact, making connections, weaving fabrics of love. Go in love, go in peace.